The following podcast is brought to you on behalf of the Saracens Supporters Association and is not an official product of Saracens Limited. Views expressed on the Fezcast are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Saracens Limited, the Saracens Supporters Association, Saracens Mavericks, or any other entity. The Fezcast is designed to be inclusive for the whole Saracens family, however occasional adult content may evade the censoring robots, so discretion is advised. Content provided voluntarily by our guests and contributors are of their own opinion, which may change over time and should not be taken as fact, particularly as the podcast hosts are regularly talking drivel anyway. If you've got some drivel of your own you'd like to share, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Fezcast_SSA. You can search Facebook for the Fezcast, or you can email fezcast.ssa@outlook.com.
It's the Fezcast with Matt Barlett and Jez Denson in association with the Saracens Supporters Association.
Well, welcome to the Fezcast. It's Christmas. It's Christmas. I'm doing my best Noddy Older impression. Actually, that's what I've been up to today as well. I've been uploading my music shows for next week, A Miserablest Christmas, Matt. I've got a show all about miserable Christmas songs, and then Thursday night is the Taka Americana, because country and western is a brilliant source of Willie Nelson singing Frosty the Snowman. There you go. But how you doing, Matt? Anyway, Merry Christmas to you, mate.
You lived the dream, didn't you, Jeff?
I try my best, mate. I try my best.
Oh, right. I'm all over the place at the minute. Started a new job last week. I'm working completely different hours to what I'm used to. I think it's Friday today. We'll see what's going on. But yeah.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, it is Friday. And we're recording this earlier than we normally do, because we'd normally wait for the reaction to the weekend's game prior to the Tuesday before recording. But obviously, we ain't going to Po no more. So that all went. Although we'll talk about perhaps a bit later on. But yeah, it's a shame that they didn't hold off on their announcement until French government around and said they wouldn't let anybody in. And then you would have had to default the game. And, well, hey ho,
you did the right thing.
That's where it goes. But we best tell everybody what's coming up on the Fezcast, because we have got a absolute bumper edition, as you'd expect for Christmas. Santa's Fezcast sack is full to brimming with guests and with contributions. So we've got two guests in two interviews split across 5 parts. This is like a cornucopia of brilliance. But yeah, Ella Wyrwas is joining us to talk about playing scrum, often scoring tries off of chips over the top, and then talking about her work with Saracens Foundation in the second part of that interview. But our main interview was I interviewed on Monday Saracens legend and coach Kelly Brown about his life in rugby and how he's developing as a coach, and also his work with stammering. And then obviously we talked about the game against Edinburgh and the game against Chiefs, and Kelly was very honest in what he said there. And then we did do a chat and talked about forthcoming games, in particular the Po game. But also we talked about recruitments and players moving on and the such like. So yeah, a really interesting chat there with Kelly that I had. Fabulous time, really nice guy, and as I say, very honest and open. And you've had a listen, Matt, haven't you? And
oh yeah, it's Kelly's like you say, he's very, very open, very honest, and it's exactly what you want to hear from your coaching staff after it's been a difficult couple of weeks actually for Saracens. So but everyone's fronting up. So yeah, it's fantastic to hear from Kelly, and looking forward to hearing what Ella has to say as well.
Yeah, indeed, because that wasn't a great result for the women's team against Quins, was it either? So yeah, be interesting to do that. Well, look, we got lots to get on with, so perhaps we best crack on with part 1 of my interview with Saracens coach Kelly Brown, where we talk about his playing career and adjusting to becoming a coach, and also his work with stammering awareness. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome to the Fezcast and part one of our big special Christmas interview. And welcoming from the club a player who played 160 odd times for the club. I think it was 19 tries scored in a 7-year period. Became an academy coach, moved away, has come back recently as an assistant coach. Welcome to the Fezcast, Kelly Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be here. And thanks for having me on.
Well, absolutely. It's our pleasure entirely. And it's great to get somebody from the club. And, you know, we've got so much to discuss. Obviously, we're recording this on the Monday after a not the best result against Edinburgh, but we'll go into that in a bit more depth a bit further on. But first of all, just wanted to ask you, Kelly, a bit about yourself. I said, you know, you had an illustrious playing career, 64 caps for Scotland, I think it was, which, you know, highly impressive. And, you know, a complete fan's favourite at the club. Always put 100% effort in. I think that's certainly something we could say about yourself, Kelly. But you're now a coach. How did you find going from a player to a coach?
It was an interesting one because I kind of, over the last sort of 2 or 3 years of my career, I thought the coaching was something I'd want to do, and it was a pathway I'd like to follow. So I started doing a bit of coaching externally from Saracens. So I coached OAs for a little bit, and then I coached the Navy for sort of 2 or 3 years as well. So I was involved in that, and the Army Navy game, which is, I don't know if you've ever been to an Army Navy game, but it's quite a spectacle. It's a sellout. I've heard. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard it's the biggest selling amateur rugby game in the world. And it is
absolutely.
Twickenham. And it's just, I think just a bunch of squaddies basically go there and have their annual catch-ups and enjoy themselves. So I was certainly the first one I went, so I couldn't believe the atmosphere. So it was great. I got to do that. So I just built up a bit of experience. I did my badges. So I did a couple of those whilst I was playing. And then as I was coming up to my last season as a player, I was speaking with sort of Mark and Phil about my contract and that sort of stuff. And then through the discussions, an opportunity came up, and they said, "Well, actually, there's going to be an opening in the academy side. So would you like to do both? And so would you like to play and also be an academy coach with a view to, after this year, to transition into full-time coaching?" So it was a brilliant fit for me. I was very lucky the opportunity came up then. I did have a bit of a thought for a while, because I finished and I physically still feel able to play. So I had to make a bit of a decision, so longer term, but that also could have been because I wasn't playing as much. In my last year, I was on the bench quite a lot. Come on, play sort of somewhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And I felt good, but it just sort of fitted into the plan. And so to get to do that was brilliant. And then after that, I just went into full-time coaching. Obviously, I've been doing all the stuff at the club. I did a bit of stuff part-time with Scotland over the last sort of 3 years, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years as well. So since I finished playing, I coached Canada for a summer. And so just sort of tried to build up as much experience as I possibly can. And now, it's 4 years now I've been coaching, and I very much enjoy it.
So when you were moving into that kind of coaching mindset, that you saw that as your natural progression in your career, who at Saracens did you look to and helped you and mentored you, perhaps going forward and brought you on to that level?
Well, all of the senior coaches, we're very fortunate at Saracens in that we've got some brilliant coaches, some of the best coaches in the world, but even better than that is the brilliant people, and so they're more than happy to share. There's no sense of jealousy or trying to hide stuff, trying to protect, their coaching IQ as you were. It's very, very open, and all the coaches have been brilliant. And you pick up sort of little bits off each of the coaches, and then you ultimately try and coach in your own style, because everyone's got their own style and their way to want to coach. And I couldn't, for example, go in and try and coach as as Ian Peel or as Mark McCall or as Alex Sanderson, when he was here, Kev Sorrell or Dan Vickers, or like I couldn't do that. So I speak to these guys, and they've helped me a huge amount. But ultimately, I've got to coach as myself.
Absolutely. And then I suppose taking it the next stage, the different direction. How much do you get? How much help do you get from the senior players who are still playing? Your Owen Farrells, your Jackson Rays, for instance. I mean, I know that when I stopped playing and started coaching, and I coached kids, and that was great, fine. I could impart my knowledge to the kids. But when I started coaching seniors, there was a change in the relationship, because instead of being your mate on the field, your brothers in arms, there might be a case where you needed to give someone a bit of a rollicking, or give them an uncomfortable message, maybe. Hey, you dropped this week. How does that dynamic change when you move from gamekeeper to poacher, or poacher to gamekeeper, as it were?
Yeah, I was probably lucky for the first sort of 2 or 3 years. I potentially didn't really coach those guys a lot, so I was around, but I wasn't directly as their coaches. I was coaching under 18, or I was doing the Prem Cup or the Prem Shield. So the younger guys anyway that I'd coached in academies over the years anyway. But I think ultimately, as long as you're honest with players, that's all you can ask for as a player. If a coach is honest with you. And also something else that I remember Brendan Venter actually said on my first day at the club, and he spoke about the difference between a skill error and an effort error, and how if it was a skill error, it was the coach's fault. Yeah. If it was an effort error, it was the player's fault. And I just found that was so freeing, because it just freed you up to go out there and work hard, and then you couldn't essentially make a mistake. And that's how I like to coach as well. As long as the effort's there, we can work on all of the other stuff. As long as the effort's there on the pitch, but also off the pitch, if there is a skill that a player repeatedly gets wrong, I expect them to put in a lot of effort on the training pitch to get it right, because if they don't, it then goes from being a skill error into an effort error. But those two things, as long as there's honesty, and as long as the player is working hard, and I am working hard for the player, I think I'll have a pretty good relationship.
Well, that's very interesting way to say that. I mean, the one thing that I was taught, both as a player and as a coach, is to give players the ability and the license to make decisions. Yeah. And in so much as I've always said, there is no such thing as a wrong decision other than no decision at all. So you've got a player's got his ball in his hand, he does something. And, it might be the wrong thing. If it's the wrong thing, you hope the player learns from it.
Yeah.
And everybody around them learns from it, and you develop. But should never ever stop a player having that desire to do something with the ball in hand. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Just be decisive. It's just be decisive. So whatever the decision is, just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about anything else. Just do it and just go for it. And whenever we have guys that are going for trials or whatever, say England age grade trials or whatever, there's a thing, we say to them, just go and fire some shots. I said, rather go and fire some shots, go and do it. And if you get it wrong, well, then who cares? But at least at least you've gone for it. At least you've been decisive and backed yourself. And then we can work on everything else.
Well, I suppose that leads on to the next thing, and we'll lead on to talking about stuff you do outside of rugby. Yeah. The important question of communication, and obviously that you communicate with players, with other coaches, with stakeholders, whatever it may be. For you, obviously, it's a well-documented part of your life that you've struggled with your ability to communicate through stammering, and have overcome it brilliantly, and do an awful lot of work in bringing the awareness of the condition, but also I think breaking down a lot of the barriers that people see and saying that, look, you know, you can do this, you can communicate, whatever. I mean, how important to you is that work?
It's very important. So the first thing I will say, just on your point there, I will always stammer, and I will always be a stammerer. What I do know now is when I work on it, most of the time I can be in control of it, as opposed to previously it was in control of me, and that was a big thing. That it was actually 2010, so just before I joined the club. I was asked to do an interview in the Six Nations, and I did it on the BBC, and I did it, and it was dreadful. I stammered, I stuttered, I blinked, I rubbed my eyes, my face twitched, all this sort of stuff. And I was really embarrassed by that, but that was the catalyst that sort of forced me into change. So from there, I went on a course called the Maguire Programme, and that is essentially, it's a course run by stammerers for stammerers. It's the same one that Gareth Gates has done. It's the same one. There's a guy called Mushi from Educating Yorkshire.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone saw that or whatever, but he's done it as well. I've met him on the course before, and it's got a couple of parts, and one is there's a basic cycle of breathing, of speaking.
Yeah.
A huge part of the course is the real assertive self-acceptance, and really accepting your stammer, embracing your stammer, understanding it's just how some people talk. And so that's something that it took me a while to really, really understand, even after I went on my first course and then went back to Glasgow. I was playing up there at the time, went in, and my speech was essentially fluent.
Right.
But the issue I had was I was happy for people to say I didn't stammer anymore, because it was a part of me that I didn't really like, and I wanted to pretend, yeah, I don't now, I'm fine, I'm cured, or whatever it was. But it wasn't until I really embraced it and understood it as being a part of me that I've been able to gain control of it. And then, so now the stuff I do with stammer, so that's just to raise awareness. It's to raise awareness for people that don't stammer, just to understand that stammering is just how some people talk, and it is what it is. It's just a thing. And also to really encourage stammerers to never let it hold them back, because that's the big thing. I at about 2010, when I decided to work on my speech, I thought at that point I had the potential to be Scotland captain, but I would never, as a coach, I would never have picked me, because I couldn't be eloquent at the times that I needed to be eloquent in terms of my speech. And so then I thought to myself, well, but ultimately, what's the saying? If it's going to be, it's up to me, or whatever they say, like a cheesy sort of phrase like that. So I thought, right, okay, well, what can I do? Like, I don't want to be, much older and think I could have done something, because anybody could do something, but you've actually got to go and do it. And so that was a big part of it. And that's where now I just want to encourage stammerers to just sort of get out there and do it and go for it, and don't shy away from anything. And if it goes badly, it goes badly. I did. So just before the pandemic, in the December 2019, I did my first ever radio co-coms.
Right.
BBC Radio London. I did 3, and the first one was shocking, like dreadful. I was really nervous, went in, it was dreadful. The second one, I was even more nervous, went in, it was pretty good. So I was pretty happy with that one. Went back again, and it was average. But it's something that I'll keep on testing myself, because ultimately now I speak every day. I coach. I have to stand up in front of meetings, and I enjoy that. It's not a challenge. I do after dinner speaking. I do motivational speaking. It's not a challenge. So my latest thing is I'm going to challenge myself with a bit of TV, a bit of live TV work. I did in one of the Premiership Cup games a few weeks ago. I did the pitch side analysis.
Yeah.
Which is the first time I've done that. And again, absolutely bricking myself, but I'll just keep on doing it. I'll keep on challenging myself, because I don't see it as a barrier. It's just a challenge, and it's one that I'll embrace, and I'll keep on attacking. And I'd encourage other stammerers to do exactly the same thing.
I will say from somebody who watched that and saw your performance, and then bearing in mind that, in previous seasons, the go-to man was Alex Anderson, who's an absolute natural at that sort of thing. And, with his sense of humour and everything, you came over absolutely brilliantly well. I think, did you do the bit in the Exeter Chiefs game as well? It was just as Billy, or just around about when Billy got in trouble with the referee. But we'll discuss that a bit later on. But yeah, no, I think you've done brilliantly. And a total inspiration to a lot of people. So great stuff there, Kelly. We'll end part one there, if we may, and we'll have a word from our one of our sponsors, and we'll come back in part two, and we'll talk about the season so far for Saracens and where we're at and how things have been going.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, I'm Alex Lewington, and I'm a Looseheads ambassador.
I'm Sydney Gregson, and I'm a Looseheads ambassador.
Our aim is to tackle the stigma of mental health in rugby and society in general.
The Looseheads mission is to place a mental health lead at every rugby club. Get in touch now to find out more.
You can find us at Looseheads on all social media channels or at looseheads.co.uk.
Take care and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Enjoy the rest of the pod.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, there you go, Matt. Yeah, really enjoyed that chat with Kelly, and as I say, fascinating life in rugby, but also outside of rugby and all that work he's done. And he was very, as I say, very honest in what he did, and I find it quite amazing how he talks about, in particular, he wanted to develop as a player. He wanted to develop as a leader. He realised that he could be captain of his country, but to do that, all the skills were there on the rugby field, but he had to do something with his, stuff that was off the field, as it were. And, I think it's not only very honest of him, but also quite brave to come out and be so open about those struggles he's had.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sitting listening to it and thinking, I actually know a weird amount of people who have a stammer or a tic of some sort or whatever, but none of them quite own the, I don't want to call it a problem really, but own the issue like Kelly does. I mean, it's you can actually see yourself in the last 2 or 3 years. He's made himself available in the media, and is not trying to hide anything. It's he's putting himself out there, and he's taken, like you said, he's taken himself out of his comfort zone, which is a very brave thing to do, and he's sort of being the media face of Saracens at the minute, and for someone to sort of be an ambassador as he has done, I think it's fantastic. So. And he's obviously a great guy to have around in general, isn't he? So clearly a very personal guy.
Absolutely. I mean, I was very interested in his take on how he's moved from being a player to a coach, and perhaps having that degree of separation from ending your Saracens playing career to starting your Saracens coaching career. When he went back to Scotland for that period of time, it did help him. But I think he's doing a fine job. And we'll talk a little bit more about his role as a coach in relation to players when we react to the second part of his interview, where we talk about the last couple of weeks and the season so far as a whole. But before that, we got another interview, and perhaps you can introduce this, because this is the one off of your bat that you got in touch with our interview who is coming up, the first part of. And go on, over to you, Matt.
Yeah, we do take it in turns to try and schmooze our way into having a guest on the Fezcast, don't we? But Ella Wyrwas was very keen to come on the show for quite a while, and we eventually managed to find a day that some of us were free. But it's good timing, really. She was recently named in the England training squad, and has obviously played most of the season for the Saracens Women's team. And we're speaking to her off the back of scoring a try that's doing the rounds in the highlights packages around World Rugby. So let's see what she has to say.
Well, let's play it in then. So this is our part one of our interview with Ella. We're going to talk about the return for her to Saracens and the season so far.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Right, so for our second interview on this show, in our Christmas cracker, we've got another returnee to Saracens, Ella Wyrwas, who started off with us a few years ago, went off to university, went off and played for Loughborough as well, managed to get long-term injuries on the way through, but has since rejoined Saracens, both as a player and as a member of staff of the Saracens Foundation. So there's plenty to talk about with Ella. So Ella, thank you very much for joining us for a start.
No worries at all. Pleasure.
And we're speaking on Friday night in the midst of what sounds like COVID chaos for the women's team, which you have no idea what's going on. So we're not going to get any scoops from you at all. And the podcast is going to go out on Tuesday after everything's played out. So at this point, we've got no idea what's going on with the Sale game. So we'll just completely avoid talking about that one.
Don't be wise.
But as we normally do with every guest that we've had on from the club, it's good just to get a background of where you started in rugby and how you got to this point, backwards and forwards between Saracens and Nottingham. But also to say we need to get in straight away. We've spoken to 3 scrum halves at Saracens now. 2 of them have left. So you've got to. Well, actually, two of them have left. Yeah. We actually have quite a good record as well. So players either leave or they get their first international caps. So Kat Evans spoke to us at the start of the season and immediately got a Wales call up. So it could go either way.
Well, I'll have my fingers crossed for that one. I've not got any intentions of leaving, so maybe it means I must be getting caps soon.
Well, I think following your try the other week, which has been doing the rounds of social media, then they'll be daft not to. I mean, that was a hell of a good try. I mean, personally, I have to ask a question about the back row that are in front of you because, any decent back row, seeing you put a chip over there, takes a penalty and just puts a shoulder in, don't they, really? But
I'm grateful they didn't.
But yeah, no, a great try and a great performance in that game, Mela.
Thank you very much. I mean, there's certainly been some debate over that try about whether it was a knock on or not. I can vouch for the fact that I personally don't think it was a knock on, but it's been speculated, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think my dad watched the replay a few times and was a little bit suspicious of it.
Yeah.
But I'm on your side, don't worry. But
It actually makes me cringe watching it now in the slow motion. It's like so mild.
But there's the highlight. Jez has been too keen to go into the highlight there, so let's rewind. Let's talk about your rugby career so far. How did you start playing rugby, and how did you get to this point?
Well, I'm a Saracens OG really, because I started when I was about 6 at Saracens Saracens Minis. Don't know what they call it these days. Minis, I think it is.
Yeah.
So my brother started rugby and I just was a classic annoying little sister, wanted to copy everything he did. Begged my mum to take me along. He ended up quitting a couple of years after and here I am. I've played for a long while, played at Saracens Minis with the boys up until when I could, which I think is under 13s or something. And then kind of dipped and dived around different clubs, girls clubs that had enough numbers to play basically, because at that point it was far and wide to find girls playing. So went between Hertford, OAs, Welling, the lot. And then went to Hartbury College when I was in sixth form to kind of pursue that a bit further. And then, came home. Gap year was at Saracens, my first year of senior rugby. So that was the first year actually of the inaugural Tyrrell's Premier 15s, first year of that. And then, went to uni, had my little hiatus at Loughborough Lightning, and now I'm back.
That's fair enough. And you started out at centre, if I remember right, from 5 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, I did. My last season, my first season at Saracens, so the last season that I played for Saracens, I was a centre /wing kind of outside back. And it was towards the end of that year that the England coaches tried to push me into being a scrum half. But I don't think I played. I think I might have played 1 or 2 kind of development games at Saracens as a scrum half. So I really wasn't a scrum half here, and then kind of pursued that further at Loughborough Lightning, and then now I'm a full-blown scrum half.
Okay, and yeah, time at Loughborough though was you had quite a nasty injury, didn't you? If I remember.
Yeah, I did some severe damage to the old knee. I tore my ACL and LCL in my second year there. So that had me out for 18 months. Sound like one of those parents that says their child is 27 months, but yeah. So that was definitely tough, and that took out basically 2 seasons of rugby, which was a lot at that point as well, because I had just kind of was trying to find my feet at scrum half, and it's such a technically and tactically different position to what I was used to, that kind of all I needed was some consistent game time and consistent exposure. That definitely set me back a bit.
So what did you do in that period of time when you were off? I mean, the first thing to say is an ACL injury makes you a proper rugby player. And I mean, I say that as someone who's suffered one myself, but I suffered one 30 years ago where the technology wasn't really there to rebuild knees in the same way, which I pay for now that I'm running and doing marathons and stuff. But I mean, what did you do in that 18 months off? I mean, how did you use that time to learn about the trade of the scrum half?
So I went through stages, to be honest with you. So at the beginning, I was just so bitter and upset that I'd had, and because it was a period of my rugby career that like I was just getting into the flow of things. Like I'd had conversations with England coaches, etc. So I was so frustrated at that kind of first period that I got injured that I kind of didn't want anything to do with it, just because it was too painful to be around it. So I know, like, I'd had conversations with my coach at Loughborough that he had been like, oh, we're keen to get you involved in any way possible, come along to training and like watch every training session, etc. And I was a bit like, actually, no thanks. I
know that feeling, Ella, don't worry.
It was such a long injury that I was like, I need to kind of find something else here to keep me going. So yeah, at that kind of first half of when I wasn't doing any rehab or anything, because I was in and out of surgery and recovering. There was that 6-month period, or probably more than that, 8-month period that I couldn't do anything. Because I had 2 surgeries, so it was a long process to kind of recover from the first surgery, then go into the second surgery and recover from that. So during that time, I actually, which is kind of what's led me to like where I am now in my career outside of rugby, but I was quite inspired by the fact that I was so unable to do anything, and like sport had been such a big part of my life and I was no longer able to do that. So I looked into sort of like disability sport and working with disabled people, etc., and got a job at uni as like the disability sport ambassador. I think that's what the job role was. And yeah, just got really, really involved, kind of trying to make sport more accessible for people with disabilities at uni. And in turn, to be honest, tried loads of cool sports myself. Got into trying wheelchair rugby, wheelchair tennis, wheelchair basketball, the lot. So that was a big change. Then I did that, and I was earning money as well then, which when I'm playing rugby I wouldn't have had the time to do. And yeah, just kind of enjoyed for that period of time not having every weekend taken up. I did a lot of, like, me and my uni friends went on a lot of kind of weekend breaks away to different countries, etc. So I actually really enjoyed that period. And then kind of that second half when the rehab started is when I really got back invested in the rugby and put my head down a bit.
That's fair enough. I mean, here's a lesson for the millions and millions of people that out there that go, oh, I could have been something, but my knee went.
Could have been a pro.
friend of the show, Hal Cruttenden. We'll just throw that one.
I mean, I must admit, I mean, it's the one thing. It's the one thing that struck me when I read Richard Hill's biography. And those of you who listen to the Fezcast regularly will know that I believe, and I mentioned it in Sir Kelly Brown as well, that Richard Hill is the greatest rugby player that has ever walked the earth, and that Richie McCaw goes to bed in Richard Hill pajamas. And I've always said that. But you read his autobiography that he had a knee ligament transplant that very nearly killed him, and he went and had it again so he could continue playing, which, not like yourself at the very start of your career, this guy had won a World Cup, been on British Lions tours, been the best player in the world, and still wanted to play rugby. And I never had that dedication. And I think you're right there, Matt. A lot of people can use that as an excuse to say no. And that does separate the sports people from those that could have been sports people, if you understand what I'm saying. So it's great to see you back, Ella, at full fitness. And as I say, I mean, I jumped to highlights early doors, but that's because I like highlights. I mean, Matt's a bit more dour than me, but this season, up until the Quins game, has been not a bad season for Saracens Women, has it, Ella?
No, yeah, it was going very well up until last week. It's been really good, and I think there's a different kind of feel around the group this year. Obviously, I haven't been involved for the last 3 years, but different from how it was when I was here, and also I know from speaking to some of the girls, different from how it was in the years after that as well. Just like there's kind of a new life about it. Everyone's getting on really well. There's like great bonds within the team, and like everyone's just enjoying playing rugby. Which I think showed, like, come the beginning of the season, we went out of the blocks hard, and a lot of other clubs, I think, took a few games to kind of get warmed up, and we were on form straight away, which was really good. But yeah, just last week definitely let it slip, but we've got some proving of ourselves to do this weekend, that's for sure.
Well, I suppose that's the question I'm going to ask you, Ella. Was last week just a bad day at the office? Just one of those things that happens in sport that, I mean, and as I say, we discussed it with Kelly over the Edinburgh game and the Exeter game, where, with the greatest will in the world, you don't go on that field not wanting to perform, but sometimes, the opposition step up, or just things don't quite click in the same way. And I mean, as I say, Kelly was very keen to say that when Saracens played Bath and Wasps and put all those points on them, you're not going to get that every week, and we should never expect that every week. But is that a case? And what were the conversations within the squad in the immediate aftermath of that game? Was there a little bit of soul searching done, perhaps?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, we really underperformed. It was kudos to Quins, like they played very well, but we also didn't play well. So it was the combination of they played well, we were at our worst, and like the scoreline obviously showed. It's quite ironic actually, because I spoke on the huddle the week before that, and they'd asked because we'd had Bristol the previous weekend and had a very emphatic win against Bristol, who were top of the league before we beat them, and they kind of said, well, that's 2 really brutal games in a row. Is that going to be a limiting factor? Is that going to be really hard for the girls? And I had said, actually, I think it's going to be the opposite, because I think, like, when you've got momentum from a big win like that and everyone's on good form, then it kind of it comes easier. Like you go through to that game smoother because you're just with the momentum. Whereas actually, in hindsight, which is always a lot easier to say, I think there was definitely an element of we were just ruined from that week before. Like, it was such a physical game. And just actually physically, I don't think we had recovered yet.
I'm blaming Matt entirely for this one, because on the previous week's Fezcast, where we previewed the Quins game and mentioned it was coming up, Matt's exact comment was, I think, that it was either going to be a case of that Saracens were going to make that step and go forward, or we're going to have 3 teams there or thereabouts. And, the second part of his prediction came true. But the point I think Matt was making last time is that we are looking at a much more competitive competition for the women this year. Have you found that for definite?
Yeah, definitely. It's proven. I mean, each season it gets better and better in terms of the competition. I think when the league started, there was quite a definite kind of difference between the top 3 or 4 teams, the middle however many, and then the bottom 3 or 4, and it was kind of like you could pretty much predict the score of any game, whereas now there's still a couple of teams that are struggling, but other than that, I think you literally could never predict the score. And it just, so far this season, there's been so many surprising, that when we played Gloucester Hartbury, I think a lot of people would have said that it would be quite an easy win for us, and actually they put up such a fight. It was our hardest game of the season up until then, and there's been so many games like that. Gloucester Hartbury versus Exeter, the same happened. Gloucester Hartbury won, and no one would have predicted that, which I think is great. It's like, it just shows that all of the clubs are starting to level off now, which is what people want to see. No one wants to see a walkover game. People want to see those big fights and the big competitions. So it's definitely going to do a lot for women's rugby, I think.
It's only going to bring the standard up, isn't it? But everyone's lifting up their game, and going back to yourself. We've said a few times on the show, your own form this season has been pretty brilliant. Let's face it. And part of that, certainly this season, we've seen a lot more that the kicking game is a lot more crucial than it maybe has been over the last couple of seasons. I don't know whether that's a result of last season's COVID rules and then switching back into normal rugby, for want of a better word. But certainly the kicking from 9 has been a much more integral part of most teams' games, but very much from us, and very successful from us, as we saw against Bristol. But have you seen the sort of style of the game developing at all like that, or is that just a?
I think previously, I think you're right. Previously, sort of, you'd have one kicker. You'd know who the kicker was on the team, and obviously you still have the likes of Zoe Harrison, who's dominating the kicking game. But it's easy for a team to defend if they know who the primary kicker is, and they know that if they shut that kicker down, that team has no other option to exit. So I think it definitely was important for the women's game to develop, to kind of bring those other kicking options in, and it just opens up the game so much more. And I think you're right. The skill set of across the league is improving every season, and the kicking's definitely part of that.
It certainly helps for us. We've obviously got yourself perfectly capable, and like you say, Zoe is probably the best in the country, and Sarah McKenna as well.
I've heard it.
And Holly Aitchison, we've got 4 or 5 ways of exiting out of the back, which is obviously going to work well for us. But the other part for you, obviously, earlier on in the season, you were called into the wider England squad for the autumn internationals. Obviously, didn't get out on the pitch, but good to be recognised for a start. And what's that experience done for you in the last sort of month or so?
Oh, it was great. So I was in camp for a few weeks, and as you say, I didn't get out on the pitch, but actually it was it was more than I was ever expecting at this stage in my career, like having my first full non-COVID season back since doing my knee, and so early on in the season for that to happen was really amazing. The camp, I enjoyed it so much. There's so much you can learn from being in that environment, and also just training full time that I've never experienced before. Obviously, we have a certain amount of contracted players who get that, but for everyone else, you're juggling it around work, etc., and you have 2 main training sessions a week. So that's kind of the main limiting factor to how much you can learn and how much you can develop. So just to have those few weeks that I was in camp and with coaching input every day. Like, yeah, I definitely think my skill set and my general understanding of the game, which my understanding of the game is something that is a work on for me anyway, just being a fairly new scrum half and still kind of learning the ropes. So yeah, it was amazing.
Well, I'd say fully deserving of your recognition, and yeah, let's hope it develops and helps you become a better player for Saracens and also obviously for England with a World Cup coming up as well. But perhaps here's a time now that we'll move on and we'll end this part of the conversation, and we'll come back in a little while in this Fezcast to talk to you about your time with the Saracens Foundation, Ella. But we're going to move on now. Matt did a little interview at the Edinburgh game, wasn't it, in the cold with your mate? Is he Scottish?
He is Edinburgh born and bred, so yeah, he was quite happy.
Do we need? Will we need subtitles for this? Or
yeah, to be fair, we both had a few beers as well, so it might be.
Well, there you go. So we'll play in with Matt's interview with his mate at the game, and then we'll have part 2 of our interview with Kelly, and then we'll be back with Ella a bit later on in the Fezcast.
Saracens against Edinburgh. I know one Scotsman. Actually, I know 2 Scottish people, but one of them that is at the game today. I don't think either of us have any idea what actually happened at the end of that game. So, Ross, Edinburgh victory.
Yeah, please don't ask me to explain what happened the last minute or so, but I thought for the remainder of the game it was a really refreshing and impressive Edinburgh performance. It was a rainy, wet, miserable afternoon, as we both experienced, and in some circumstances that played into our hands, but I thought I think given that both teams were perhaps not quite at full strength, I think it's fair to say both teams made the changes they needed to make, but really impressive performance from the Edinburgh pack, I thought, and we will put that down as a pretty famous victory for Edinburgh, to be honest.
I think that's fair play. I mean, I think we made a point of, in the first 10-15 minutes, we both thought that the Edinburgh scrum was, it had Saracens scrum on toast, to be fair. And I think that was kind of the winning point. But it's a competition that both sides have rotated a little bit for. But obviously Edinburgh played it to their standard, really. I mean, the front row was the winning point, surely.
Yeah, look, VP Nell will be playing in that Edinburgh front row in 2030, in 2040 and in 2050, and he will be winning scrum penalties against whoever you put him up against. The man just loves a scrummage, and he, I think, really led that pack. I think it may have been a tactical decision from Mike Blair that played off very well to rotate parts of the backs, rotate parts of the scrum, but go very much full noise front row. And I thought Schoolman, McAnally and Nell really held their own in that first 70 minutes. He nailed it. I was a bit worried coming into the game about what I was excited to see our back row playing against Saracens, and then Jamie Ritchie got injured slightly last minute. Bill Matters out for a while. Intrigued to see how Crosby and Haining did, and I thought Crosby was very good, stepping up a level to an extent. Nick Haining played well. Hamish Watson only played the first half, but I thought the pack were very good. It wasn't a day for the backs of either team to get involved much. Boffelli showed for the first time his kicking skills, and it turns out if you've got someone who can kick the ball from halfway, that's pretty helpful on a rainy, wet, miserable day. But yeah, there wasn't much play from the backs. Shout out to Charlie Savala. He's not played much rugby as first choice 10 to step in against Saracens away, and the one time in the first half that he got any front foot ball to put in a crossfield kick that set up a try was pretty impressive. Fair play to Charlie.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, our backs were pretty anonymous. Saracens' back were also pretty anonymous. It was a game of attrition. It was a game of the first 9 players getting involved.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, it's a bit of a shit day for rugby, really, isn't it? But
we're both standing here in, full-on winter coats, hats, gloves, scarves, etc.
Yeah, I'm quite cold, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, Edinburgh fully deserving of the victory. I mean, we still don't have any idea what happened at the end of the game. Obviously, this podcast will go out in about a week's time. We might finally figure it out. From our side, obviously, the main thing is we wish all the best to Capelli Pifoletti, going off with a very serious injury, hooker, in the first half. Again, at the moment, we don't know exactly what happened there, but it's a very long stoppage in the game. He went off on a stretcher, so all the best to him. But yeah, I mean, it was a decent game of rugby, obviously played under some serious rain, so both of us standing here are soaking wet and freezing cold, so we're going to end an interview pretty quickly now. But yeah, Challenge Cuppers got off to a difficult start for Saracens, but congratulations for an Edinburgh victory. Shall we go and warm up with a hot chocolate and a
slide tackle to celebrate being in winter? I think that's the best goal.
So welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Saracens coach and former player Kelly Brown. And Kelly, I'd like to ask you about the season so far. So perhaps from the first point to say is, obviously, we went down to the Championship. We all know the ins and outs of that. We've gone over that 1,000 times before. Coming back after a successful Championship season, albeit with a blip right at the start, which was perhaps a dose of reality that was good for the club. I don't know. But how do you think the return to the Premiership has gone halfway through?
Yeah, I think it's gone okay. The thing is, it was an interesting time last year. I think ultimately it was a good experience for us. It's so you said I came back. So my first day back in the club was the Thursday before the Pirates game, actually. Right. So that was an interesting time to come back, and then obviously what happened. But I think the exciting part was then after that, just how we pulled together and how everyone really sort of pulled together and fought, and it showed the real spirit that we've got in the club. So that was great. And then I'm back in the Premiership, and you know what, it's going okay. We know from previous seasons, it's a marathon. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we know that in the first sort of 8 or 9 months, you're trying to set yourself up ready for the sprint finish. And so I think in terms of that, I think we've done a pretty good job. We've had a number of very, very good performances that sort of spring out and jump out. Obviously the Bath away game, Bristol away on the first game of the season, these sorts of things, but also a couple that we feel we potentially haven't quite fired and haven't played as well as we can. So there's a lot to work on, but I think sort of all in all, I think it's past marks, and we're sitting in second. So that's a pretty good spot to be in as we come up to Christmas and then sort of into the new year.
Well, I suppose that's the question I'm going to ask you now. I mean, as fans, we watched the Bath game and the Wasps game where suddenly, it seemed like it was 1,000 points put on. It was like, the Bath game, tries from almost everywhere, Wasps again. And us as fans are suddenly starting thinking, yeah, we're back. We're back. We're going to show everybody, that it doesn't matter. Saracens are the best team out there, blah, blah, blah. And kind of our expectations suddenly started going up and up and up. And I think, last couple of weeks, maybe, again, a little bit of dose of reality, a resetting of our ambitions and expectations, perhaps, I don't know. But is that, were those 2 games perhaps too good a wins, maybe?
No, I don't think so. I think on those days, I think we were very accurate. We were very clinical. And so we got any chances and we took them, and we were able. And so perhaps the big thing is we were able to really stay in the games mentally and stay in a really, really good place emotionally. And so it's very, very difficult to sustain that over the period of 11, over the period of 10 or 11 months, which sort of comes back to my previous point of it being a marathon. And it is about just sort of making sure that we learn we learn our lessons. Even the London Irish game that ended up in a draw, and so we've learned a big lesson from that, which I'm sure we can work on, and we'll come back to sort of later on in the season. It'll hold us in good stead. As I said, all we got to do is we got to finish, preferably in the top two, so we can get a home semi-final, or if not, certainly in the top four, because ultimately over the years, we finished first and finished first by a long way, and then lost in the playoff, or we finished fourth and won the whole thing. So we do have experience of it. And as I said, I think we're doing okay. Some very good performances, some not as good, but all it'll serve to do is to keep us on our toes and to really get excited, to keep on improving.
Well, I suppose the next question is, and this is perhaps the difficult one, is to talk about some of the negatives. And certainly the two things that are sprung out over the last 2 or 3 games, you mentioned the Irish game, Sale, I think one of our followers, one of the fans, Debbie Knight, mentioned in one of her blogs that it gets a bit frightened when we end up playing against 14 men, because it suddenly seems to be a bit of an issue there. And then obviously the thing that we really need to talk, or we'd like a perspective on, is the incidents with the discipline in the Exeter Chiefs game. Which I'm sure you as coaches, and I don't expect you to, to call out players or anything like that, but I'm sure that you as coaches would have looked at that and said, look, regardless of what's going on in the game, that's not good enough.
But it's something, we've spoken about as a group, and it was addressed, immediately, by the players, like we're all in it together. We know it wasn't good enough from us, but it was all of us. It wasn't the individuals, it wasn't the players, it wasn't the coaches, it was all of us collectively. And we've spoken about, what type of an organization and team and unit we want to be, and we obviously made some errors in those games. So we've spoken about it, learned from it, and it's something all of us are going to work hard on, and obviously be very, very wary of moving forward.
I suppose that's great, and nothing more than what you'd expect. And certainly, I've been in that position myself as a player, albeit not at that high pressure level. But I suppose the question to ask is, and on our last edition of the Festcast, I made the point that at the end of the day, after the Exeter game in particular, do you actually see that as a missed opportunity? Because to only lose by 3 points against a team that have been, your equals, Saracens equals over the last 5 or 6 years, Exeter, Saracens, that's normally your final. My perception was that Exeter went into that game, for all of what they said, that, the history wasn't a motivation. It clearly was a motivation. And I think this game has affected Exeter this season because they're kind of focused on it, because I think they wanted to go out and make a point, and why wouldn't you? I mean, that's up to them. But not playing our best, 100% our best, a few points left out on the pitch, we still get a losing bonus point away at one of the hardest games of the season. Now, that's, taking into account everything that's gone on, when you come back, you're going to turn around and say, okay, that wasn't as bad as perhaps in the initial aftermath of the game you maybe think. Is that something?
I think there's two sides of this. Obviously, is the outcome of the game and how we feel the performance was. And I think ultimately on that day, I think, we felt our performance wasn't quite where we'd like it to be. We had a few opportunities that we didn't take. Exeter were pretty clinical as well, to be honest. And so we don't see it as a missed opportunity, because it's gone, it's in the past. The big thing is, as I said, is that we learn from it. And I think that we have, we had a couple of brilliant meetings, and we've obviously learned, after the Edinburgh game at the weekend as well, again, just not quite taking our opportunities. But as long as we learn from these things, and that's the main thing. It's a long season, and we need to make sure that we learn from them, and then we put our learnings into place. So come the end of the season, you know, we're firing, and we're in the mix, you know, for silverware, because that's sort of all you can do is put yourself in the mix, and that's what we're trying to do.
I suppose that's the next question I ask about the European thing is coming back up to the Premiership from the Championship. As much as we would love to win the trophy and be sat there at Twickenham in June or July or whenever it is this year, I can't remember. I mean, the season seems to go on longer and longer and longer. But you know, if you were to be realistic, coming back up from the Championship, you know, would winning the trophy be a reasonable ambition? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But the European Challenge Cup, bearing in mind that we've got 3 stars on our shirts from winning the European Cup proper, is the expectation of fans for certain is that this is a trophy, this is a piece of silverware that we've never won, and that we're kind of almost expecting to win. Now, we should never expect it, but again, we go out and play Edinburgh, and everybody said, "Oh, we'll beat Edinburgh at home." And then you looked at their squad. I mean, Hamish Watson, you've got, you know, Nick Kane, ram-packed full of Scottish internationals, and that's a pretty damn good Edinburgh squad that they put out on Saturday and got a result. I mean, is there more pressure on the club though for European silverware than perhaps Premiership silverware?
It's not something that we've even spoken about. Like, our pressure, and it always has been, you know, we always say it's the most important game is the next game, and that's how it always. It's how it always has been, you know, in my time at the club. You know, we don't set, as a group, you know, we don't sit down and set targets. Our target is just to prepare as best we can to be successful in every game. And if we do that, you know, we'll give ourselves an opportunity. And we were speaking actually a few weeks ago about the 2014 season, so the 2013-2014 season. And I don't know if you think back to that. So that was the season that we lost the final of the Premiership and the final of the Champions Cup in the same week.
Yeah, that was not a great week at all.
But the question is, was it a successful season?
Well, I would say personally as a fan, and then you're looking back now, at the time, it hurt. It really did hurt. If nothing more than sitting in the Millennium Stadium, which I hate as a stadium, I really do. I don't know what it's like to play in, but to sit in the lower tier and have to watch most of the game on the television, I hate that. You know, right, yeah. But it left. It wasn't a great moment. However, I think those 2 games contributed more to the following year's success than any other than perhaps, I remember the final against Leicester, was it 2010, the year before we finally won it.
Yeah.
And my niece would have been 7-8 years old, not used to seeing it for disappointment. And the Leicester scored that late try, and I remember looking over and seeing my niece crumple because, you know, just didn't, and having to put my arm around and say, look, it's all right, it's only another game, when actually I was spitting chips. Yeah. But the following, I think what it is when you see adversity or failure, I say in inverted commas, perceive, you know, not achieving, it's how you react to that. And Saracens have consistently, every time they've been knocked back, I think the way the club's set up, the way it's coached, the way it's managed, they come back and learn and progress and achieve the next year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And that's what we're trying to do. So my point being that in 2014, because I was asked that question, I was like, you know, was that a successful season? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know is the answer. But then actually, if you go through some of the milestones that we had in that season, we'd done stuff, you know, the club had never done before, and we'd achieved things, and we'd done this, we'd done that. All that had happened is we'd lost in 2 finals, one of which in like the 120th minutes of the game or whatever it was. So if it's no try then all of a sudden it becomes a a successful season. So it takes me back to the point that for us, our next game is the most important. So Poe's the most important game now. And we'll get into that game. And after Poe, it's into Worcester. And that's all we can do. You know, we tend to find if we ever look so too far into the future, you kind of lose sight of the now.
Right.
And you lose sight of the present. And we potentially thought that was maybe in the Pirates game, you know, we were maybe slightly guilty of that, of thinking about, okay, we've got to get out of this league.
Yeah.
So thinking about that as opposed to the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that we always try and do, is focus on the day-to-day. So what can we do today to get better, right? Okay, I've done that. Now on to tomorrow. And that's how we always try to be.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, this is Jez from the Fezcast to tell you about another one of my passions. I love music, and I have my own radio podcast station, Tarka Blowpig Radio. This is the home of great music presented by myself and my friends, be it folk, rock, indie anthems, progressive music, you name it, we've got it covered. So if you want to listen to some great music, tune in to us at mixcloud.com/Tarka Blowpig.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, okay, that was part two of our interview with Kelly. Chatted to him on last Monday. Yeah, in the immediate aftermath of the Edinburgh game. I suppose we best talk about that. I mean, first of all, you know, we are at pains when we speak to people from the club that we're not like, you know, as we've often said, Arsenal TV, where they slag everybody and anybody off. We do try to keep it a nice relationship going, but, you know, we do still ask difficult questions. And I think Kelly batted those back quite nicely, really, didn't he? You know, he didn't try and fob us off. Again, honesty is a word that we use quite a lot in relation here, and it is one of our the club's tenants, as it were. And, you know, I think what was interesting was the idea of collectivism. You know, like, you know, you'll sit there and say it was Billy and Mac who chops into the referee, but the team, the squad, the coaches have all taken it upon themselves to say, no, it was all of us. It just happened to go through that person, but we all take collective responsibility, and we know all of us we need to improve, which is something from the previous Fezcast that you in particular were very keen that the club went forward and did, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, it's brilliant to hear, you know, but we don't want anyone making excuses, and people are just fronting up, which is step one. Step two is actually sorting it out. But, you know, I came out of listening to that and feeling pretty confident about things at the club, really. I mean, teams lose games. Teams lose games they shouldn't. Teams lose games they should. We go through periods where we lose matches. You can't have it perfect all the time. And it's how you react to that. I think some people around, some fans around the club are reacting to it a bit too strongly, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is what it is. Obviously, in Europe now, we're in a very difficult position because we've been too quick and honest about COVID cases at the club, and we've forfeited a game just before they've postponed all the rest of them for, so we're now 2 losses down in a four game pool, which makes things pretty tricky for the last 2. There's obviously still a chance we can qualify, but you know, it's just one of those things, and we have to chalk it up as a learning opportunity. I've just about thawed out from my day at the ground last weekend, by the way. It was a pretty miserable one.
Well, I must admit, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the fans, and again, it's something I mentioned to Kelly at the time. I think perhaps the level of expectation is higher amongst fans than perhaps it is within the club. And, you know, in the cold light of day, looking at that Edinburgh game, Edinburgh put out a bloody good team. You know, Hamish Watson, Henry Pygos, Nick Hayne, they were chock-a-block full of internationals. And when you're missing a couple of key players, you can't expect Maro Itoje to be absolutely brilliant every game he plays. He will do his utmost to be absolutely brilliant every game he plays, but other players, need to step up to his level. And I thought that against Edinburgh, there was a little case that perhaps Maro stepped back towards mere mortals level, shall we say, but also, not wishing to diss down Manu at all by any stretch of the imagination. But I think having an Owen Farrell at 10, with his old head, leading the way, chatting to the referee in the correct way, managing the referee, shall we say, I think that game might have gone a bit differently. And as I say, that's no disrespect on Manu at all. I think he stepped up and he had a solid game, but it wasn't, against some really, really good players where his only experience has been against championship players, and no disrespect to the championship players, but, they're not Hamish Watson. They're not, that level. So, yeah.
I think both Ross and Kelly mentioned the fact that Edinburgh's team selection, they did rotate a few players in and out, mainly in the backs. That worked out well for them because it was very much a forwards game because of the weather. And also they were full bore in the front row. They had the strongest front row, one of the strongest front rows in the UK, I think, actually. Edinburgh's front row there with Nell and McAnally and the like. And they were up against a slightly rotated front row on our side. And as Kelly mentioned, Harvey Beaton making his debut in Europe, having only just made his Saracens debut, I think, in the Cup pretty recently. Fair play to him, and he didn't do too badly at all. But obviously, up against
the other side was an issue on the scrum, and
yeah,
I think he was unlucky because he came up. Everybody's saying he's a prop. When he got yellow carded, he looked absolutely bemused because he did not know what to do. Now that's not him not having the skills at all, because he can prop. It's the problem was he was coming up against WP Nell, who knows lots and lots of tricks. This guy's got 70 odd caps for Scotland. The guy's grown up in South Africa where scrummaging is a religion. What he doesn't know isn't worth learning. And he was very cute in the way that he managed to drag an arm in and presented a painting or a picture or a scenario to the referee that once it happened once, well, it was inevitable that that was going to happen all the time. And, the only hope is that the player learns from that, as I'm sure they will do. And I'm sure other players will learn from things like Manu will learn from having that experience and become better players because of it. And I really think they will do that.
Absolutely.
Well, we best move on to our second part of the interview with Ella now, and we've talked to her about her work with Saracens Foundation.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Welcome back to Ella, who's joined us for the second part of her interview. Beginning to lose the track of what we got on in this one. We normally struggle with just one guest on, but when we got two guests on and everything else going on. But Ella, not only are you a player for Saracens Women, but you're also obviously heavily involved in Saracens Foundation, which is obviously something that many of us as fans know about. But tell us a little bit more about the foundation and tell us about how you're involved with that organisation.
So Saracens Foundation is the charitable arm of Saracens, and it's, I think the general kind of punchline of it is that it's a sport for social change charity. So it's using sport as a tool to kind of change the lives of our community. So we've got, I couldn't even give you a rough number, but loads of different projects that target different parts of our community. So what the sector that I work in is our participants with learning disabilities. So I am a project officer for disability. So we run a range of projects that look after the health, education and employability of the participants. So we've got weekly sports sessions, which are obviously more targeting physical and mental health. Running employability courses, which actually I'm running one next week. And yeah, so we've got a huge range of projects across the whole of the foundation. Can't say I'm an expert in the projects outside of my kind of own little bubble, but yeah, I'm absolutely loving working for the foundation. It's a really great group of staff, really great group of participants that we work with, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
Well, I know I'm friends with Mark Sindall and his dad Anthony, and Mark who comes along, and you look at his Facebook and he's forever posting about various different things. And Mark always puts me to shame when he puts up his park runs he does, because he runs park runs about 8 minutes quicker than me. He's actually a really talented athlete. And I know a couple of years ago when I was doing the London Marathon, and I had to do the virtual London Marathon, and I did 10 laps of a local reservoir and park. Mark came down and ran a couple of laps with me to give me some support, and was absolutely wonderful, because there's a man with a smile on his face wherever he goes, and I know he gets an awful lot out of what he does with the foundation, and so many different people will do the same, and it's such a great organisation. I know my dad always make sure that he supports it as well. And tell people how they can support the foundation, Ella, if you could.
Well, yeah, so we've got a range of projects that accept volunteers, which I think is a great way that you can support the foundation, but also you can get so much from it yourself. We've got loads of volunteers across our disability programs, especially. And they're volunteers that now kind of have been coming back week in, week out for years, just because they enjoy it so much. They see kind of how much effect they're having on these participants. It's the highlight of the participants week, and that feeling is something that you don't get from a lot of things that you do in day-to-day life. So yeah, I think that's, for me, that's kind of a win-win way that people can support the foundation.
Well, no, absolutely, and I will say to everybody to get along to the website and to find the links on the website to the foundation and get involved. It does so much great work in the community, and giving confidence to people who perhaps need that little push, maybe for whom it doesn't come maybe naturally because of the struggles. And as I say, we talked with Kelly Brown about his work with stammering and the awareness of that, and just awareness that people can get involved in sport, can get involved in life, regardless. And I mean, we jokingly off air mentioned that I'll be watching the Strictly Come Dancing, and we see Rose in Strictly Come Dancing, who's deaf and is in the final of it, and he's amazingly inspiring, and he's, for people like me who's been able to play sport and do stuff, and it doesn't come easy, but I can do it without having to worry about being able to or having any stigmas or whatever it may be around it. To see people supporting people to make the most of themselves, it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, and it's just, I think the impacts that these projects have kind of, they go so much wider than just the participants themselves as well. It's such the disability hub that we have is such a lovely community that the families have all created this kind of amazing bond together. It's respite for the parents when their children are taking part in these sessions, and they get to kind of relax. They get to not worry about their caring duties anymore and just kind of speak to their friends. And yeah, just there's so much more that it does than just the direct impacts that you think of when you think of these projects. So yeah, it's amazing.
I suppose the other thing as well for those parents is to realise that they're not alone, and for the people themselves to realise they're not alone. It's not unique to them, that there are plenty of people sharing what's going on. And yeah, no, it's wonderful work that the foundation do.
that's what Saracens is so great at as well. Like you speak about Mark, he's like the biggest Saracens supporter ever, and he's able to participate in these programs with the Saracens Foundation, but then he's also able to be part of this kind of Saracens Supporters Association without any prejudices, any kind of discrimination. He gets taken in to that. He's got so many friends through that. He comes to games. Saracens really is quite special at creating these opportunities for people.
That's the biggest thing for me that's coming out of that is obviously some projects like these could easily be an opportunity to give people with disabilities a chance to play a game of rugby and go home again. But it is so much more than that. You talk about the employability courses, the other, the bits outside of just playing rugby that offer so much more to people, and it does sort of mimic the way the whole Saracens setup works. In that it's not just about on-pitch performances and things. Obviously, for kids out there, it's a little bit different. But there's so much more that goes with it, and it's about setting people up for the years once they've stopped coming along to the Saracens programs and things. So it's encouraging just to see it looked at from that really broad perspective.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, what our aim essentially is to, once people are of the age that they can no longer take part in those programs, that we've given them the opportunity to develop the social skills, develop employability skills, develop their education to the point that then they can kind of enter into the wider world and have more of a chance at succeeding. And that's exactly it. You summed it up.
Brilliant. Well, Ella, I think it's been fabulous talking to you about the foundation, but also about your rugby. We wish you a Merry Christmas, obviously, and we wish you all the best. And we're hoping that by the time we've gone out, you've played a game against Sale and you've won the game. But if you haven't, you haven't. And, we'll keep on going again. Please don't be a stranger to the Fezcast. We'd love to have you on again in the future, obviously. But yeah, thank you ever so much for being part of the Fezcast with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much there to Ella for her contribution to our Christmas special of the Fezcast. Wonderful chatting to her. Again, brilliant to discuss all the different aspects of not only her playing career, but also her off-field career. And fascinating it was too. Brilliant stuff. Well done, Matt, for organising that one.
I've left myself on mute for a bit there because I've got a rabbit who's doing interior design right next to me. I'm running out of people to talk to now to get our guests on. So please get in touch with us. Come on the show. But no, it's really good to have Ella on. Obviously, she's come on leaps and bounds over the last few years, juggling rugby with degrees and work and all sorts, as many of them do. So. But yeah, she's obviously been one of our players of the season so far and is obviously doing some really good work off the pitch. So fantastic to speak to her.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, let's get on now. And our final part of our interview with Kelly, which in typical Fezcast fashion became out of date fairly rapidly. We did talk about what's going on in the season forthcoming, what's happening at Saracens, and also quite interestingly, hopefully in this part of the of our chat, we talk about players leaving and recruitment and what's happening in with young players coming through as well, and where the club's going forward. And I know I saw on Sarries Fans Forum on Facebook there's been quite a bit of to and fro, and particularly in the light of Vincent Koch, but also the ongoing rumours about Maku and Billy possibly going off to earn a few euros or whatever, maybe, and see where the club's going forward from there. So, yeah, that's good. So that's coming up, our final part of the interview with Kelly Brown, which will follow straight away.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
So welcome back to the last part of our interview with Saracens coach, Kelly Brown. Kelly, how's the feelings in the camp? Have we got any injury worries that we need to? I mean, obviously we lost KP and Billy during the game on Saturday against Edinburgh. Owen's out for a reasonable period of time. I know Jamie George was at the game, but he's out for a little while. Got a little bit of a problem there at hooker by the sounds of things.
Yeah, so we'll find out a bit more. So we weren't in today, so we'll find out a little bit more about these guys. The medics will check it. So with Bill and with KP, and we'll find out more. But we'll sort of know a bit more in the next couple of days. But ultimately, if guys are injured, it's unfortunate, but it's very much the next guy will come in and will step up. I think if you look at KP and Ethan Lewis, so they've certainly done that. Like, in the last sort of 2 or 3 games, after Jamie's injury and Wolfie obviously being out as well. So these guys, they just come in and step up, and that's something that we've always done really well as a club.
Well, that's good to hear that. Obviously it's not good to hear that injuries are there, and it's a big physical game these days. And I mean, Billy's only just back from an injury himself, and you seem to get the impression that Billy's playing at the moment as some of the best rugby of his club career. I think how much of that is to do with not being part of the England setup and trying to prove himself to Eddie Jones, which no point trying to get into Eddie Jones's in mind. If you listen to any of the Fezcasts, you'll hear that I have a rant about Eddie on quite a regular occurrences. But I suppose that leads me on to asking you the question, and particularly with your involvement as a academy coach over the period of time. Some of those players are players that you got hold of at an early age and have really stepped up. Who's impressed you this season? I mean, for me personally, I'm going to mention someone we've had on the Fezcast recently, Andy Christie, who's really performed some great stuff, I think, over the last few games.
Yep, I completely agree. I think Andy's had a good season. He played a bit in the Championship last year, and that was again sort of a really good experience for him. And then to take that form through into the Premiership, it's been great to see. It's our challenge as an academy, to keep on sort of bringing through these players. We've had a really good academy structure over the years, and we've brought through a lot of players, and we want to keep on doing that. And Andy's one that's really sort of come through and appears to be kicking on now, which is great to see. I just want to highlight that one of the guys, just at the weekend as well, to see Harvey Beaton come on at tight head, his first game in Europe. What a challenge for him it was, but I thought he stepped up. I thought he did really well as a tight head. I think he's only 21, so he's very, very young. He's a big, strong boy, but still, that's incredibly young for a tight head prop. If you look on the flip side, Edinburgh, I've got Nell, who is sort of 33 or 34, knows every single trick in the book, and Harvey is now sort of trying to learn all these tricks as quickly as he can. But I thought he did incredibly well. And there's a number of other guys that are coming through, and then I'm sure will sort of continue to kick on as we go forward.
Well, I suppose you highlighting Harvey there is perhaps as good a time to mention, obviously, the news this week that Vinny, Mr. Incredible, is off at the end of the season. Off to the pests. Sorry, wasps. This now. Obviously, he's moving on for whatever reason. He's moving on, and we wish him all the best because that's the way we are. He's been a great player for the club. But does that leave you now with how do you replace someone as good as Vinny? Obviously, bearing in mind that no player is bigger than the club, and even Marrow, Owen, players who've retired, Brad Barrett, you've always had someone coming along. But is there a process of planning now going into place to saying, right, okay, we need to look at this position in particular for the end of the season? Where do we go for recruitment? Do we look from within? Do we look at the players that are coming through, or are we looking to bring somebody in that position?
So the process is sort of always ongoing. I know that Mark and Phil and Nick Kennedy is the head of recruitment, so those guys are working unbelievably hard and do all the time about succession and planning and who's going to step in where and all this sort of stuff. So those guys have got a plan in place, which they'll be putting into action. You know, Vinny's been great for us. He has been great. A World Cup winner, obviously a very, very good player, but we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We're sad to leave him, but we're sad to lose him, but we'll be okay because, as you rightly say, we always are. It'll give someone else an opportunity, and for that person that gets it, I think, for example, so this year, so Marco came in, Marco Riccioni, and I think apart from some sort of rugby diehards, they probably, with all due respect to Marco, they probably didn't know a lot about him. He came in, he's been incredible. I think for us, just how he's fitted in to the club, an incredible player and a great guy. And it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate now that he's picked up an injury.
Yeah.
But it just shows, we need to give another player an opportunity, whether that's from inside the group or from outside. But I'm sure that Phil and Mark and Kendo will have a plan in place and they'll execute that.
Well, brilliant. I mean, that's fantastic. It's great to know that, the club's moving in the right direction. We know we're moving in the right direction, but it's nice to get that confirmation from someone at the coalface, as it were. So, Kelly, I think that's as good a place as any to end our interview. And just to say to you, thank you ever so much for coming on. Thank you for supporting the Fezcast and what we're trying to do and being so honest and open about everything that's been going on in the club over the last period of time. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, it's been my pleasure. And thank you very much for asking me to come on. And indeed to you and to all of the listeners for all of the support. It's massively appreciated and it's never something that we take for granted. So, so thank you very much.
Well, indeed. Well, have a great Christmas, Kelly.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good Christmas.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Thanks again to Kelly and obviously Ollie at Saracens for facilitating that for us. And a fantastic chat all round with Kelly. I just want to pick up with you, Matt, before we sign off. A couple of things. Obviously, the big news recently has been Vincent Koch signing for the Wasps. And moving on. There's been a lot of concern around fans about where this all leaves us, particularly in front row. You've got, as we say, the rumours that Maku may not be renewing at the end of the season. Jamie's not as young as he once was. Vincent's off. We brought Marco in, who's done a fantastic job at tight head. So I think actually, Marco is going to be, Vinny might not be as great a loss as perhaps everybody's fearing. And I think Kelly was quite right in pointing out that no man is bigger than the team or the club. And, we've lost star players in the past and filled those places that you've not noticed them almost after a little while. I mean, so yeah, I think Nick Kennedy's done a great job with recruitment over the past few seasons, but I do think obviously that the salary cap is going to cause problems for a lot of clubs. I mean, interesting to see Ellis Genge going back to Bristol. That's an interesting shot, and everybody, Rugby Pass and all those clickbait place sites linking Ellis with Saracens, like any player who comes up, I think is going to get linked. But yeah, it's quite an interesting one. I suppose perhaps the other thing is looking at cheap South African imports again. But who knows?
Yeah, I think if you believe absolutely everything you read among all of the rugby sources, our squad's going to be about 85 players next season, isn't it? So,
yeah.
But yeah, like you say, players come, players go. It happens all the time. There's been many, many world-class players that we've had in our squad, and we've had them for less time than we've had Vinny Cox. So, You can't argue with what's going on, really. It's a shame he's going to Wasps, but to be fair, we've pinched a few of their players over the years, so maybe it's starting to balance out a little bit. But like you say, the salary cap is reducing by quite a significant amount. I think there's also some rules around an increased number of England qualified players that you need to have. And at the end of the day, some people have to leave to balance the books. Like you say, Ellis Genges has obviously gone back to Bristol. There's a few rumours now circulating about Exeter that may actually come to fruition before this podcast even goes out, about the likes of Johnny Hill and Sam Skinner that might have to go to balance the books over there. So it's not just us, it's everyone. Who knows where those players, because obviously if every single team in the Premiership is having to shed players, where are they going? Are some foreign imports going back to, oh God, I almost sounded a bit too UKIP there, didn't I? Going back to where they came from.
Matt Farage on the Vezcast.
You know what I mean? Going back home to the family. So, but or are they going to France? There's a bit more available in France, or is it going to strengthen the Championship in a way? Look, we don't know how it's going to play out. It's very, very early. With teams sorting their squad out, and yes, we're losing players, but we'll still sign some as well. And we don't know who they are yet. So let's not panic just yet, shall we? But the main thing to say is for Vinny, he's been a fantastic servant for the club for 5 years. It feels like he's been around a lot longer because of what he's given to us. And whatever he does in the rest of his career and beyond, he goes with our blessing. And he's definitely coming back to the club at some point, at least just to say hello.
Yeah.
That's it.
What can you say? It's, the players will do what they need to do for the benefit of their families or whatever. And, as I say, up until the point he pulls on a yellow and black shirt and he's wearing a black or a red shirt, Vinny will give 100%. You know that. And that's all that you can ask of the lad. Up until the moment he no longer takes a pay packet from Saracens, he will be a Saracens player and he will give 100% effort every time he goes on the field.
Absolutely. And he got folded in half by the Cornish Pirate scrum, so clearly he's rubbish and we don't need him. Despite the following week getting our individual performance of the season in our awards. But Matt, it's as ever, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you over the last year. It's been an absolute pleasure presenting the Fezcast for all of our followers in the Saracens family and outside the Saracens family as well. I know there's a couple of people outside the Saracens family listening, just perhaps even just to have a heart attack or, like a bit like when I watch Question Time or something, just to shout at. We don't get too many complaints.
No, but it's been an absolute joy. And I suppose we best finish off our bumper edition here by saying to everybody listening in Fezcast land, Merry Christmas. I hope you have a safe one. That's the most important one. But you get to see your family. We get to see a bit of rugby at some point, and that we all reconvene in the new year. Because I think we're going. This is going out on this is the 21st. So our next show should be the 4th of January, which will be after the Northampton game, if that all goes ahead. If we haven't all got the Omicron or whatever it's called, yeah. Omicron, isn't he a Georgian prop? He might be our new tight head prop then, won't he? Yeah. But yeah, look, thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Hope you've enjoyed the Fezcast. And as Matt says, do get in touch with us to be on in and get involved in this with next year. And we'll be back in 2022 after Christmas. And we wish you all the best for the holiday period.
Ho, ho, bloody ho.
Absolutely. Miserable Christmas show. That's what you want to listen to, Matt. All right, then.
Cheers, all.
This is the Fezcast.